Good morning, everybody. It's nice to see all of you. My name is Harry Vandevelde, and I have the great honor and privilege of working here at the South Shore Leadership Center as well. If there's anything that we can ever do for you, make sure you do call Courtney. She'll make sure that we get it queued up and help you in any way possible with your thoughts on leadership. We created the non-for-profit philanthropy roundtable out of a conversation that occurred at the board level in terms of saying, when we drive programs through fees, there's an opportunity there to, in fact, have people who aren't able to engage in conversation or develop a toolbox with regard to leadership, who are just shut out by the mere fact of economics. And we wanted to be cognizant of that and respectful of that, and that's where this program came out of. So, for Donna and for Matt, I apologize at the very beginning. You've seen what we're going to talk about today. In my opinion, the driving force behind leadership always starts at the very core of who you are. And I've said this many times, you can't lead the we if you don't know the me. And I really, truly believe in that. At this point in time, in my career, I would have to say that I've actually witnessed and experienced that firsthand through my own particular life. I thought that when I was a young man, I was going to become the greatest educator in America, and I was going to be the most fantastic headmaster that was ever placed on this earth. Little did I know that what I thought and what I wanted and what I needed were, in fact, completely opposite what, in fact, has to occur for someone to be a good leader. And that's why I'm excited when I have an opportunity to work with people in terms of them looking at their leadership styles and their wanting to build their toolbox with regard to leadership. And so today I want to go through basically three things. I want us to touch base quickly on what's the difference between a leader and a manager, and get a sense for that. I want us to make sure that we all have a pretty good sense this morning while we're giving ourselves 48 minutes away from the email and the phone and the craziness of our day, to remind ourselves of what great leaders are, the characteristics that they bring to the table. I want us to kind of have a good set of findings for us in terms of what kind of a leader am I specifically. And that's why you have the instrument in front of you that we'll go through quickly today. So you'll walk out today and you'll have a pretty good feeling for where you're at in terms of your leadership model. We're going to talk about that. We're going to look at the responses, and we're going to get some feedback on that. And then we'll close things out with a pathway down David Letterman's top 10 list. We're going to do Harry's top 10 list for what great leaders are. So that's how we're going to wrap it up. We'll be out of here by 9:30. Please put your hand up at any time. I want this to be as inclusive and as participatory as possible. But I will be facilitating and directing the conversation. So, good to go on that? Is that what people are hoping to get out of the next 46 minutes and 12 seconds? All right. So let's look at that. What's the difference between a leader and a manager? And words matter, right? So I have intentionally pushed us into two rabbit holes. There are types of leadership, and then there are tasks that managers do. Please don't take this personally. If your title is in fact manager, don't allow us to make this a personalized conversation. This isn't meant to do that. But throw out at me, what do you think we have here in terms of types of leadership versus tasks that managers do? Oh man, this is the kind of thing that I was not counting on. I was driving here this morning hoping I could sit in a room for an hour and shake off my networking hangover. I wasn't counting on this guy to ask me to talk for an hour. So tell me, I'll start the ball rolling. One type of a leader is a laissez-faire leader. You may have worked with somebody who, in fact, shows up every day and really doesn't care. They mail it in. They see you at lunch. They might go on a networking exchange with you, and they feel that they conduct. I've actually heard people say, I conduct more business with my team after work and on the golf course than I do all week long at work. How many people have ever heard somebody say that? I get a lot of my work done on the golf course. That is one of the greatest lies I've ever heard. Right behind, I'll just stop for one. We have an alcohol theme flowing here because of the Portage Chamber this morning. So a laissez-faire leader, really hands off. What happens, happens. I worked for someone at one point in time who said, I brought you in to be higher than me because I don't ever want to have to tell people no. Give me a task that a manager does.
Oversight.
Oversight. What does that mean, Matt?
Make sure that the gerbil keeps running around the track.
There you go. I love that. Excellent. Make sure the gerbil keeps running. Man, we've all been in a shop like that, I bet. Give me another example of either a leadership style or what a manager does.
Delegate.
Delegate. Is there a delegatory style of leadership?
I think so.
Yeah. So we would call that a transactional leader. We would say a manager delegates as a task. So I worked back in the day, I worked as a painter, and you would show up at the cage every morning at 7 o'clock, and the guy behind the cage would have a box sitting there for you, and they'd have a job ticket on it. And you'd have a sprayer, and you'd have a color, and you'd have a location, and you'd go and do it, right? He was the paint shop manager, and he was the delegator. If he liked you, you got to go cut trim on windows all day long. If he didn't like you, you got to go down and, spray the blast furnace, right? It was one of those deals. So you're a delegator, but over here, as a leader, you're also transactional, right? Transactional leadership is one that says, yeah, I'm going to pick up a ticket from on high, and I'm going to make sure for myself. Transactional delegatory leaders are also, for those of you who like the parlance, they are CYA leaders. You've all worked for somebody who likes to cover their butt, right? Cover your butt, leader. Give me some other types of leaders or tasks. Here, I'll show, this is one of my favorite. There are managers who love the HR handbook. They're a HR policy-driven leader. When you walk in the door, you are seen as ID 35748. They don't want to, Alex, I don't want to hear about how your trip went. You were late. You filled out a vacation ticket and you came late. I don't care about the fact that the cruise ship you were on was docked in Puerto Rico. All right? And that nobody was getting out of Puerto Rico. And you made it back. You came by submarine and raft, and you made it back to work. So managers, there are managers that live in the HR policy world. That's their job. That's what they're getting paid for. Give me another example of either a type of a leader or tasks that managers do. Brad.
A servant leader?
Servant leader. You better believe it. Help everybody with a understanding in a nutshell of what that means.
They're to make sure everybody raises their level of the game. They're to help everybody get to the end goal.
Who's in charge of, so how many folks have heard that leaders lead from the front, the side, and the rear? That model. We've all heard that model, right? what is the servant leader? See the front leader, side leader, or back? All of them. Yeah. The servant leader is also sometimes referred to as a servant or a transformational leader. The transformational leader is the leader that we all want to be and we all want to be led by, the transformational leader, right? This is kind of, that's who we're hoping to be a part of. Any other tasks? So managers make sure that reports are in. We've all been in that position. I worked for a while for a company that at 3 o'clock on Friday, the phone would ring in your office, and the voice at the other end of the line would not say, "Harry, how'd the week go? Things good? Client happy?" The voice at the other end of the line, in the gruffest possible networking the night before voice, would say, "Give me the numbers." That's all the voice on the other end of the line would be. And you would just rattle out, according to your spreadsheet. You wouldn't even give the categories. You just had to do them in the right order. So we all know that there's managers out there. That's their job. They got to put the stuff together to hand to their boss, who's handing it up, swimming it up the salmon ladder. Can anybody think of any other types?
That you do it the way you've always done it. I don't know that one called.
Okay, so that's a little bit of laissez-faire. We're going to call that type of a leader, well, you're going to leave that as laissez-faire.
Oh, the dictator.
Oh, Donna, as it's coming out of the old markless pen, dustless pen, the autocrat, the autocratic leader. And they're out there. Don't kid yourself. Just because, we have the millennials are now being led by the Pepsi generation. Don't kid yourself. Don't look at statistics and think to yourself, holy cow, all those guys that won the Great War and, came back and created factories, right? We all have that vision in our head of the, what does Brokaw call them? The greatest generation. All those guys came back and they ran businesses according to the way they were a Marine or in the Navy or in the Army in World War II or Korea. I mean, heck, I was coached by that kind of a guy. That guy doesn't get even a sniff at the door anymore to get around kids. That's the guy that used to scream at you, "Water? There's no water. You don't get water," right? Well, today you get sued for that. He'd be arrested for not having water available for kids. That style of leadership, though, is still in norm, and that's kind of something that we don't have time today to look at, but when you look at the autocratic leader learned that behavior. And so one of the questions I would have for you is, on this, just as a side note, I'll just put these two little numbers up there. In L&I, next session, we're going to attack the question of, I'm frustrated by the fact that I'm a 21st century leader working in a 19th century model. There is a situation right now out there in America that says, I inherited the Henry Ford assembly model, and yet Henry Ford didn't even know what a robot was, right? But Ford is still using decks and decks of training from 1914. They've changed the font, and they've changed the paper, and they've changed the logo a few times, but you're now being expected to be a 21st century thinker and leader, but you've been kind of shackled by a 19th century model that you might be working in. And there's simple things, right? How you communicate in the office. Nobody ever heard of flexi time in the 19th century. Flexi time was be thankful if you get Thanksgiving off, right? I mean, we're still talking about child labor laws back here in some of these situations. So 21st century leaders, though, you have to learn how to communicate more effectively in a variety of different ways. We have a thing that's called the millennial. So now we have a third of the workforce who is going to be taking over in a very short period of time. The metrics show that they're growing at a geometric rate, right? We also have a workforce that is far more diverse. Fastest growing population in the United States is Hispanic. So there are certain dynamics that are taking place that run contrary to the 19th century model if you're going to be a 21st century leader. Okay. If you think of anything, we'll throw that up there. But you're getting a sense for the fact that leaders really work off of theory, right? And managers do stuff. They process stuff. We want to have, and let's be clear, we want to have everybody on your team thinking that they are a leader. So even if you're in a shop of 10 people and you've hired on somebody who comes in at salary band D down here, and you're at salary band A, your goal as salary band A leader is to see salary band D rise along with you. One of the greatest things that a leader can do is to surround themselves with people that have become leaders themselves. That's our goal. That's a transformational goal. Okay. Throw out, in your opinion, what great leaders' characteristics are. Give me something from that you think great leaders bring to the table.
They listen.
Great leaders listen. They're inspiring. I like that. Have you worked with an inspiring leader? Share with us what that means for you.
Someone that's kind of willing to like raise you up with them, so they'll give you like, you know, if you're working in a work environment, they'll give you tasks, but they'll also kind of help you along in those, and like, you can do this one. And
I like that. So you're inspired by also feeling that a leader may be also a mentor for you. You like that breaking of that caste system and the fact that a project may have been given to you and now you can step in and say, Mary, here's where I'm at on the project. Can you help me make sure that I'm on the right path? Right? Yeah. Transformational leaders seek that opportunity. That's big. That's real big. I used to always tell people, you know, my door is always open. And people would say, no, it's not. You're in meetings all day. But my door is always open. And an employee stood up in an all-employee meeting one time and said, your door is always open, but hanging over the door is a guillotine. His vision of the invitation was, the only reason I'd walk in there is because you want to, you know, do some harm to me. That's, if you have that environment that you're working in, boy, you got a whole other set of problems. So you're inspiring. What else? Give me some other stuff that great leaders do. Empowering. Empowering? And tell me an example of that.
They wouldn't trust the employees to do a good job, and most of the time they will.
Key word, trust. So we know that there's proven through research, like top 5 things that great leaders do. We have number 1 on the hit parade there. They are active listeners. Number 2, they can be trusted. Trust is at the very core of being able to move your team forward. Trust is at the very epicenter. You will lose your team within the first week that you are on a new job if, in fact, from Monday's conversations to Friday's conversations, your team, who, don't kid yourself, they will hold all of the meetings in all the great places, bathrooms, parking lots, and bars. And they will say, he told you what? He didn't tell me that. I met with him in a one-on-one on Tuesday, and he said the following. And the person says, well, I met with him on Wednesday, and I got the entirely different review. Trust is at the very core, at the very core. What else?
Communication skills.
There you go. So Brad, tell me, what do you expect out of communication skills of a great leader?
They can communicate what the core values are of the institution or company or nonprofit, and relate to people at different levels, and be able to communicate to people out in the field, people in the office, other people in the industry.
What else you want to see out of your leader? It's right in the title. Yeah. Vision. Everybody wants to know that the person who's at the helm knows where they're taking us. When I am a leader, I make sure that I, in fact, work on those things, right? So you always want to make sure when you're a leader that you can tell the four aces of your company. That's the elevator speech, right? Everybody should be able to make sure that as they're waiting in line for a coffee at Luke Oil, and you have the embroidered shirt, and someone says, "Oh, wow, what's Path? That sounds pretty interesting." By the time Donna checks out at Luke Oil with her coffee, the person walking away should understand that Path does four things for teen development in Northwest Indiana. Always know your values and the missions, and the mission statement. This is very important. Very, very important in terms of communicate. I've oftentimes said in meetings, talk to me like I'm a fifth grader. And I say that for a reason. You'd be very interested, I'm sure, to know that here we are in a bastion of higher education, Purdue University Northwest, the fifth largest university in the state of Indiana. In their very conference center, there are some pretty significant $2 words that are used in this room. If I were a neutral body coming in to try and see what was going on, I'd have a hard time figuring it out. We want to make sure that we always remember that we are all in the people business. And most of the time, the people you're dealing with probably have a little bit of a fear level with regard to the conversation. Cindy may have clients that she's seen for years, but things have changed for her at H&R Block. That couple that she's seen come in the door year after year after year may have had a loss of a spouse in there. They may have had a loss of a job. Something may have occurred. And Cindy picks up on the fact that something's going on with this particular client in their file. She's not going to go in there and start spitting Charitable Contributions Act of 1993 at them. Now, she'll work into the conversation, have you made sure that you're covered with regard to your communication with Social Security with regard to your husband's passing? She's going to make sure that she wants to make sure that she doesn't overwhelm them with language, but that she's talking to them. We're all in the people business. And lastly, everybody always wants to make sure that their leader knows where they're taking us. So vision. Give me something else from a great leader.
Empathy?
Empathy. The most important thing that you as a leader can do is make sure your team understands on a daily basis that you are human, that you are not the nameplate on the door, that you are not the business card, that you're not the picture in the front of the annual report, that you're human. You do want to make sure that you say to Curtis, "Curtis, how are things going? You just started with the company, and this is not a 90-day probationary performance review. Talk to me. Give me 20 minutes of your time today, Curtis. Tell me, what do you like? Is what we hired you to do what you thought you were going to be doing?" One of the greatest questions that a leader can ask a team member. We went through what does Sherm call it, the $7,000 process of making a hire, the quiet hit to the budget. You've involved 7 people on your team making the hire, and here we are. We got our 5-star player. Curtis is on the team. We're glad to have him. But Curtis, every day driving into the office, says, "This isn't what I signed up for at all." Well, you might want to start thinking about getting on top of that at 30, 60, 90 in casual ways. Get a sense for that. Build an empathetic ear toward the employee. Stuff that oftentimes a great leader has the ability to make sure that all mountains turn into molehills. Poor leaders take molehills and turn them into mountains. I think that's really important to keep in mind. Give me some other great characteristics of a leader. We kind of have it out there. I'll throw this out. IQ plus EQ. Stay current with what's going on in your business. Develop a strong sense for, if you're in accounting, you don't have to read the entire chartered code of accounts, but know what's happening. Be knowledgeable. Your clients want to see that. When someone has the 45-minute session with Brad on creating a charitable remainder trust, they are counting on Brad being up to speed on what a charitable remainder trust can accomplish and why Brad is asking them to contemplate moving into this kind of a charitable instrument. Be up to speed. If you were to ask Matt right now all the great things that are happening on the federal level with regard to public television and public radio, he can give you chapter and verse. I know that. He stays up to speed on what's going on in his world. But at the same time, Matt, as a manager, is also building his toolbox with regard to emotional intelligence. So don't just be book smart, be book smart plus people smart. And you can say to yourself, that's just not who I am. I'm just not a people person. Leave me alone. And people have said that, right? You've worked with people. I'm sure you've been around folks that have said, hey, I wasn't hired to be your camp counselor. Well, you would hope then that person might start thinking about just remaining in a manager's role, because they're going to do some serious damage as a leader if they don't have IQ plus EQ. We're going to look at that real quick. So, I'd like you to take out right now the instrument that you have in front of you. It should be stamped with sample on it. Here you go. You're welcome. And go through and answer your sample. Those are, you can see on the top, I left it there intentionally. This has not been bootlegged. This is, in fact, as it says on the very top of the page. It is ours to use. Let's take 7 minutes. Go through and cross those off. Donna, who's serving as an ambassador and also an advisor for us as we move through L&I, said, let's make sure we put better ways of tracking on our form. So now you can see. Did I do it? Yeah, there's little boxes there, but I have to do it with the computer. Make it prettier. I'm not computer literate. Good. Yeah, we're going to have about 7 minutes of dead time. Yeah, there you go.
Thank you.
I think that woman came in late.
Oh, Monica
Yeah.
was late. And she left her coffee in the car. So she's not having a good day. A good start to her day.
Hot coffee with you to warm it up.
check your mic pack real quick, just see the battery level. Should still be full, but well, we got the time. Yeah, you're fine. Okay. There's a time to change batteries. It'd be now, right?
There you go. So if you're done going through the questions, if you take this, the instrument that you have in front of you that says L&I 42 on the top, you can put the numbers in the boxes according to the question. So everybody at this point in time should be able to take their score sheet, put it across the top of each of the 3 buckets. So the question in number 1, in A, transactional, go to what you answered in number 1 and put the number there. Go to answer number for 11 and put the number there, 16. Total that up, divide it by 8, and that gives you a number. 2 minutes. We pretty much there? Raise your hand if you need more time. Okay, well, you're going to get the Jeopardy tune in a second.
What does it mean by 8, when multiplying?
Yeah, divide. So you had 8 attributes in that line. Sorry, that's St. Clement math from 1968. Blame it on Sister McKella. Who's not a sister anymore. She married Father Monavon. It was the 60s. What can I say? Okay. Oh, phones are coming out. The death of the wristwatch and the calculator, the smartphone. My daughters always laugh at me. Anybody got a calculator? Yeah, it's in your hand.
What do you want to say?
Oh, look at that. Talking at me, all right. Said my daughter, you never wear a watch. I don't need a watch, Dad. My phone tells me what time it is. Raise your hand if you, in fact, are a transactional leader. If your dominant side is a transactional leader. You see the descriptions there for transactional. And trust me, don't be afraid to raise your hand if you're transactional. And you're like, God, man, I was really hoping to be transformational. This whole thing is aimed at being transformational. I really want to be transformational. No one in this room is a transactional leader. Oh boy, this is really going to get interesting. How many people in the room are transformational leaders? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Wow. That is awesome. I'm going to work for all of you. And that means that no one in here is a passive leader. Correct?
Carrie, don't you think it's part of the non-profit? I mean, it's different.
Interesting that you say that, right? So, Donna says, don't you think that that's a part of the non-for-profit culture, right? Or isn't that kind of the DNA of those who live in the non-for-profit world? We have For-profit. I kind of put you in a quasi bucket of for-profit. You can't get the stripes off the cat, right? So you take that with you, right? For-profit. You're not for-profit.
Monica too, she works for H&R Block too.
For-profit. Last I heard.
We like making money.
Yeah. So that's very interesting. Having been in this business now for a long time, people will say things like, oh, well, people go to non-for-profit because they can't make it in the for-profit world. People have said those kinds of things, right? Or the only reason those people have a job over there is for the Ministry of Employment. They couldn't get a job anywhere else, so let's let them work at a non-for-profit, right? Well, I worked in the Catholic Church for a long time. There is a little bit of that. I used to say, why does that person have that job over there? Oh, that was Father's cousin. It's like, oh, okay, well, nepotism occurs on a lot of levels. It doesn't have to just be the church. But this is fantastic. 9 of you are servant transformational leaders. So, the question I have to make sure that I pose to all of you is, if you look at your instrument of analysis and there's something really jumping off the page at you, like if you are 99% dominant transformational, that is a problem in and of itself. Great leaders are hybrid leaders. Great leaders are hybrid leaders. If you want to lead your team, there are days when you have to come in, and I worked for a guy who used to call it banging the table. We've probably all been in that meeting where at 10 o'clock on a Thursday morning, Tom wants to see us all in the boardroom. And everybody comes in. Don't sit down. This won't take long. That sets the tone. And, the annual report. Boom! Do you know that we missed our numbers? Well, occasionally Tom had to do that. There is a form of leadership that says you need to be assertive with regard to announcements. Now, if Tom said every day at various times, it's 2:12, everybody in the boardroom, and then on Thursday at 1:10, everybody in the boardroom, you'd think you were working for Captain Bligh, right? You'd say, this guy's, slipped a gear here. But a hybrid leader is one who, in fact, does all that. There was a woman that I worked at a place, and every time I would walk down her hallway, she'd hear my walk. My right leg is shorter than my left leg, and people say, we can always tell it's you coming on a polished floor because of my gait. And she would hear my gait. I'm not proud of this, but I would shuffle when I was on her floor after that. And she would come out, and she would, in fact, want to let me know just about everything she had heard that morning. And I had to at times become extremely passive and laissez-faire with regard to her. She thought she had the in because she'd come out and see me in the hallway, but in fact, I didn't really, between all of us, I didn't really care what she had to tell me. I cared, but I didn't. So, that is something for you to keep in mind in terms of leading. We can't lead unless we know who we are, right? This would be a perfect time for me to put a commercial in for Leadership Northwest Indiana. And if you'd like to build your toolbox with all leadership skills, please come back. I want you all to take a quick look because of time. We're at the 9:22 mark or whatever it is. Give the top 10 list here a quick look. I'll go over them quickly, but I want your feedback. I want you to add to this thing. I want you to make sure that my top 10 list gets improved. I claim that a great leader is a visionary, that on a regular basis, I bake into my conversation where we're going, how we're going to get there, who's doing what, and when it's due. So the key as a great leader is not just to say, here's where we're going. It's not just to say, here's where we're going. Don't just walk in and say, the LaPorte division of H&R Block is going to have a 13% increase in new clients. You have to be able to say how you're going to do it, social media approach, flyers and mailboxes. In other words, what's your communication strategy, right? Who's doing it? Are all of us doing it? Every non-for-profit I've ever worked for always has at some point in time in a meeting that says, we're all fundraisers. And the maintenance man's like, I change the light bulbs and I sweep up and what do you mean? We're all fundraisers. Well, we are all fundraisers. We're all stewards of the gift. And when? Are we on an ambiguous rat tail here? Do I get to say to H&R Block, we've raised 13%, but that was over 22 years? No. So not only tell people where you're going, but the how, the who, and the when. Throw in the why.
I think you can add on to that, you gotta know where you were, where you are now, and where you're going.
Great. Thank you for that. Number 2, create success scenarios, not fail options. This happens on a regular basis. We hire Kurt because Kurt showed us that he has an MBA from Wharton and that he, in fact, is an absolute whiz when it comes to being able to sit down and walk someone through a pivot table and show them that within 18 months they're going to have X amount in their money market account. Right? Kurt doesn't really like interfacing with people who walk in the door off the street, and Kurt really doesn't like networking. We hired him because he, in fact, is a machine when it comes to data. Why would we want Kurt to be the guy at the front desk who's interfacing with people on a regular basis and networking? Now, Kurt will do just fine at dinner with a high-level client because he can speak to the specificities of why he's there. The point being, if you've taken $7,000 of your company's time to make a good hire, make sure you put that good hire in a position to be successful. If I have a basketball team that has 9 kids on it, all of them below the height of 5'4", I'm not going to play a low post offense. I'm going to play a spread offense. And we're going to shoot every time we cross the timeline. Right? Always create success scenarios. Success breeds success. It breeds success for the individual, the team, the institution, your client. You're creating the win-win-win-win, right? We all want the win-win-win-win. No one likes on a daily basis to get out of the car and walk in and say, I know I'm not going to do well today. They hired me to do this, but I'm really doing the following. That's just not fair. Great leaders are fair and just. Number 3, be true to thyself. If I were to ask you to bank one thing that you walked away today, if you had windshield time between here and your business, be true to yourself. Anybody can look right through somebody who's not genuine. Anybody. Your team is very receptive to that. Their antennae are running at a high level when it comes to their boss. If you're true to yourself, if your moral compass is set every day, and you are really, truly working on that, if you are really genuine, your team will rally around that. Number 4, be a great listener. I have 2 handouts for you that we won't get to today, but I would ask you to spend time today when you go back and close your door and decompress from this unbelievably effervescent 90 minutes that we've spent together. Read the stuff on Daniel Goleman, what he says about being emotionally intelligent. Remember what we said, great leaders are EQ plus IQ. Emotional intelligence, and Goleman, YouTube Daniel Goleman, emotional intelligence. There's about a 17-minute conversation that he has and talks about emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence characteristics are on that sheet. There's a second sheet that I've included for you. All of us need to continually work on being a good listener. We've all been around the nodder. We've all been around the yeser. Yes, 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 yes. Well, I want you to work on the skills that show that you are a great listener, that you, when you are in a meeting with a colleague or a team member, that you actually have a pen and a paper in front of you and you're writing down what they're saying. There's nothing that tells someone more emphatically that you are listening to them than you're writing down their words. Besides, it creates a great paper trail for you in terms of your relationship with them moving on. I get to say to Kurt 120 days from the conversation, hey, I was going through my notes, and he's going to go, wow, you really did listen 120 days ago. And I see that you were struggling with our software system. How's that going? Right? Be a great listener. I'm an old coach, and I completely and thoroughly believe in applauding publicly and assessing privately. Every chance you get, make sure you give credit where credit is due. And that credit line doesn't start with you. Okay? I'm not going to stand here and I'm not going to herald all of the victories of the South Shore Leadership Center and not recognize the work of Courtney, the work of Donna, the work of Brad, right? I'm not going to do that. Some people might, take that credit, but I have a great belief in that. I'm also not going to stand over there and scream at Courtney and say, I didn't want the room set up this way and the apple cider stinks in front of all of you. Something that stupid or granular. Well, that ruins her day. She don't want to come back to work the next day, right? Now, we might have a conversation during our one-on-one where I say, hey, we should really look at menu. Let's have a better game plan for how we want to set the room up.
I'd say on that though, you go back to 3, you have to be genuine, because to do it without really meaning to say, yeah, Courtney does a great job with that, that conveys even worse if you don't do it correctly. And I think that happens a lot too. You're supposed to do that if you don't do it.
Yeah, so let's talk about that for a second. We're all human, right? In fact, the greatest thing about being a leader is being able to prove on a daily basis that you are human. So let's take that for instance. I'm using Matt now as our touch point. He just got out of a meeting with the board. He's the vice president. He's been handed a deck that he has to accomplish within the next 45 days. For the previous 45 days, he's been working with 2 members of his team to achieve something, and he's just not seeing much traction develop on that. Matt snaps on those 2 individuals. He's human. It's going to happen. What's Matt's recourse? We're all able to say that because hindsight's 20/20. What's Matt's recourse? As a laissez-faire, transformational, transactional, autocratic, or passive leader. What, in terms of what we want to do to transform the organization and advance it, what's Matt going to do?
Go back to those 2 individuals and apologize.
Immediately. And this is not I'll get them afternoon. This is not I'll send them an email tomorrow morning. We're all human. They're going to respond to the fact that Matt says, hey, look, I'm really sorry. I just got, work flows down and the board just dropped a tsunami of work on me, and your report isn't what I was expecting this morning. Let's talk about that. Do it immediately. Never, ever, ever let something fester, just turns into an infection and then you're cutting your arm off, right? So that's important, I think. I think it's very important to remember that every lesson in life comes from Godfather 2. And you may recall in Las Vegas when Michael Corleone says to his brother Fredo, never talk about the family's business in public. And more importantly, remember, it's not personal, Fredo, it's business. That statement is very important for a leader. But an empathetic leader knows how to, in fact, make sure that it doesn't become personal. So I would also recommend that you go back and you Google guiding statements for HR conversations, there's great things to put into your lexicon. There's great ways to start conversations not using the "you did this" statement. We as an organization are going to suffer mightily because of you. Things like that just don't cut it, right? Learning to set those frameworks. But I think it's also very important when you look at that to take a look at the next one, which is that hard conversations don't have to be hard. If you work on building your toolbox as a leader built on being genuine and being trustworthy and being empathetic and being a good listener and engaging in a collaborative and collegial spirit, those conversations aren't hard because you're really assessing and assisting all the time. Great leaders are great coaches, right? We're always coaching up on a daily basis. On a daily basis. Right? So I think it's really important for you to keep in mind that hard conversations, so many times the dysfunctional work environment is occurring because of the manager, not because of the employees. Employees are going to do what you want them to do. Employees, just because they're adults doesn't mean they don't want to be told what to do. They want to be told what to do more than kids. People who are getting a paycheck from you want to know, am I meeting your criteria? Have the conversation on a regular basis. When you look down there, don't allow fear, comfort, and like to be the hurdles to honest and appropriate. I'm really afraid that Kathy's not going to like me. We've gone on 2 conferences together. Heck, we went shoe shopping in New York. It was great. I don't want her to not like me. Get that out of the equation. Great leaders don't want to be liked. I have stated this publicly in front of the largest amount of employees I've ever had all the way down to the least amount of employees. I didn't come here to run for homecoming king. Okay? I'm not here to be liked. I have a family at home. I have a dog that licks me every night. I'm liked. I don't seek like in my place of employment. Honest and appropriate discussions. So I think that's something you have to really keep in mind. Number 8, herald the victories. So we'll go back to Donna's statement, which I think is really important. Non-for-profits have got their nose so close to the glass so often that they never have time to come up for air and really say, geez, we did a great job on that. Herald your victories. Small businesses, herald your victories. Don't let the fact that you had a team meeting with your 9 people and you put a series of goals up for them over the course of the next 60 days, those 60 days come and go, and your team's like, what the hell? We had all get together and we all agreed we're going to do the following. Did we do it or not? Did we hit the mark? I mean, have cupcake day. Have Portage go get whacked night, you know? Okay? Know your HR manual, okay? Make sure the job descriptions are true to what you are expecting someone to do. Courtney and I had a conversation about a month ago. Courtney's been with us now for 5 months, is it? 6 months. And so we had a series of conversations to hire Courtney. And in the course of those conversations, I stated there were 4 key things that Courtney had to make sure she did on a daily basis. Time had moved along. It's a 2-person shop. We're trying to get the business up just like you to a new level. We had to sit down and let's remember, what were the 4 things that Courtney was hired to do? So do that. I got a lot out of it. I think she got a lot out of it. And, you know, we moved to a different level as a team because of that. Herald your victories internally and externally. Too oftentimes we let that stuff go by, and we shouldn't. We should not let that go by. If we are a genuine, empathetic, caring leader, people want to be told you did a great. They all want the attaboy. I can't come up with a term that's not sexist. at this point in time in my life. I've used manpower and got yelled at in an audience. It's not manpower, it's people power. Okay, people power. Herald your victories. Number 9, if you want gratitude, look it up in the dictionary. Being a leader is lonely. Being in charge is not fun. Don't go and be in charge because of your ego. Your ego should get checked at the door. Some of you have heard me tell this story before. At one point in time, I used to raise a lot of big money, and I was driving a very, very wealthy woman from her apartment to a dinner. And in the course of my driving her there, she said, "Harry, how's things going now that you're the vice president?" I said, "Oh, Mrs. O'Neill, it's really, it's not like it used to be." And she let me whine a little bit as we were driving along. And this is a gal who was a very high-ranking person in a large corporation. And out of the back seat, I heard this voice in the dark say, "Well, I heard it from my husband years ago, and I believe in it today. If you want gratitude, look it up in the dictionary." I can still see where we were, at the stoplight on A1A where we were when that happened. And it's very true. Don't do it for your ego. It's not, you won't get any paychecks that way. And number 10, say the Serenity Prayer every single day as a leader. If you don't say the Serenity Prayer as a leader, you're in deep, deep trouble. And if you don't know what the Serenity Prayer is, Google it. So you know that you've heard it, you see it in movies and plays and television and stuff. It's attached to recovery programs, right? So people in recovery, they want them to start to bake that into their daily life. I would like to have that baked into all leaders' lives. So does anybody know the Serenity Prayer? Exactly, right? So when Reinhold Niebuhr, who is a theologian at Yale, wrote it, he had in mind, not recovery, he had in mind living your life in a healthy manner, right? Not just recovery. So the Serenity Prayer says that you should learn how to recognize and accept the things that you cannot change, find the courage to change the things that you can change, and then most importantly, have the wisdom to know the difference between the two. If I could have that tattooed on my forearm, I would, in terms of, there are days probably that, nice thing about prayers is you can't wear them out. You know, there's days when you say to yourself, "Holy cow, I've used that Serenity Prayer 950 times today." Know the Serenity Prayer, because you can't, you're not that, no one's that perfect. No one can possibly know how to do all the things that a leader has to do. So I'll stop there. And where are we at on time?
You got 2 minutes.
Well, we'll extend that over since nobody's here.
You're out in the
Crud. So who wants to add? Who wants to make sure that Harry's top 10 list gets, and I like these two additions. Anybody think that they have something that they want to throw in? You have to do that or my ego will say, "I've created."
I'll have those prepared for next time. The dictionary's on the table.
Dictionary? For what?
Because you just said look it up. If you don't know, look it up.
All right. So tell me, in terms of leading others, being a good leader, is there anything on these two boards that you're going to be able to take? Have we been able to build your toolbox? Are we able to have said that when you get in your car and you head back to work with your board or your team or the volunteers at United Way and all those folks that you take care of, all that great client base, what else can we do as Courtney and I want to try and make sure that we keep getting better at what we do? What would you like to see happen on this topic?
I was just going to say that I actually just came off of a previous employment where was all under some very terrible leadership, and I was very discouraged because I wasn't getting out of the leadership that what I thought, and I thought maybe I had a misunderstanding of what leadership was, and so this is actually just really encouraging that that I was right.
Good.
And that I'm right where I should be at right now.
Yeah, it's always nice to know you're not crazy, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because it's easy to fall into that rabbit hole.
Being the only one there, and everyone else seemed to just be like praising this guy, and I thought he was crazy, and everyone was kind of, and I was like, all right, am I the only one who thinks this is totally messed up? But yeah, no.
So if you don't mind,
Yeah.
just, and I don't want you to violate any codes of confidentiality, tell me, what did you experience, and how did you in fact try and address it, and then you eventually decided to move on?
Well, basically, I mean, I worked for a tyrant. I mean, he was that.
Autocratic?
Yes, thank you.
Mhm.
That was exactly how he worked. The applaud publicly, assess privately, opposite of that. I mean, I was berated in front of our, well, not just me, everyone who he got upset with would just be berated publicly. It was a horrible situation. I went to him within the first 6 months of my employment there and asked him what my earning potential was there at the company, just because no one had ever told me.
Uh-huh.
He basically treated me like I was being selfish and asking for a raise, and that I should just shut up and do my job. We had a number 2 in the company, well, his number 2, that I was actually really good, I was pretty good, I had a good working relationship with, and I kind of addressed him with this situation, and he was just kind of, he had been in that position for 11 years, and so he had kind of learned how to exist there, and so he was basically like, don't rock the boat, man. And I was not that kind of person who, so I pretty much started, after 6 months of employment there, I started looking for other employment somewhere else because I was like, I can't stay here. So I ended up being there for 2 years before I got out. But yeah.
Yeah. Congratulations, though,
Thank you.
for not deciding that you were going to be the individual that, you know,
Yeah.
just didn't rock the boat.
Mm-hmm.
Life's too short to not rock the boat.
Yeah, I was the first employee to leave that department. Since that department was created like 5 years ago, I was the first one to leave because I don't know why, just everyone, I think he kind of employed people who he knew would be passive and just let him rule the way that he wanted to, and I don't know, he made a mistake with me.
There you go. Anybody else want to share? Yes.
I think too that by following this list and by understanding what good leaders are, keeps us in check ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, I was in an organization that had bad leadership, and that's why I left, because it wasn't right. You know, double standards, breaking the rules, things like that. It was okay for one, but not for the other. That's bad leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not what we're focused on for what I do in my organization. It's about the veterans, and everything else doesn't matter. So we set our veterans up to succeed.
There you go.
Always, I tell them every time, I says, I don't test you until I know you're ready to succeed. They haven't always believed me, but that is one thing that we do. We set them up to succeed. We practice and practice until they're ready to go.
So in your case, where you've said they don't always believe me, that's early on in the conversation, right?
Yes, very early.
Yeah, so just share an example of late in the conversation, late in the relationship.
Okay, I just finished up, there's 3 steps that we do, 3 levels, and now we're up to the 4th level with this gentleman. And he's concerned about tucking the dog underneath the table. Okay, and that doesn't sound very difficult, but he's not been practicing that because he hasn't taken him out to public access yet. So I said, practice at home. If he does it at home, which is the worst scenario because, you know, little kids throwing food underneath, I says, he'll succeed. He's ready. I think he's ready. He doesn't think it is.
Well, that's interesting. So you also have a dynamic that very few of us have to deal with, and that is your client population is not only human, it's also canine.
Yes, yes, canine.
That's a very interesting wrinkle to the equation. That's for sure.
I
Matt?
think one of the things that's and I don't know the numbers, you probably do, that's why people leave organizations.
Yep.
It's not for salary. So if you're losing good people, it's usually, whether it's the senior leadership or a level leadership.
Right. That's one of the baseline greatest statements ever with regard to leadership is that people don't leave companies, they leave leaders. Right? And there's a lot to be said about that. That is for sure. Okay, I know we're on time. Would anybody want to share anything with the group for the good of the cause before we? Yes.
One more thing. Do you feel that to be a good leader, that you're supposed to really be forming those that are under you to move forward to be the future leaders of our organizations?
Should be in your top 5 mandates on a daily basis. Yep. So one of the things, if we were to take a look at over here, that next bullet could be balanced. So a great leader is balanced in that they don't show up at work at 5 a.m. and leave at 7 p.m. and never go on vacation. There's a little something in the back of your mind that says this person doesn't trust us to do anything here. A balanced leader is one who says, I can go on vacation for a month. I can go take care of my mom for the next 9 weekends in a row because I trust my team. Trust. I trust my team will get the job done. I've created a group that knows my vision. They know their role. They know the deadlines. They know the outcomes that we're looking for. They'll get it done. I can go and I can concentrate on taking care of my mom. Right? So balanced is really important. I worked for a guy that was that way. You know, I'm the first car in the parking lot in the morning and the last car in the parking lot at night. Well, yeah, you're on your 3rd wife and, you know, we know those kinds of people.
So I'm going to ask a question from what you said before that we didn't talk about yet, and that was consistency. And you talked about your staff should always know you show up at a certain time every day.
Yeah.
This consistency idea. So that's kind of been on the top of my mind a lot. I can't make that happen.
Because of the nature of your position.
Maybe. But I thought about that. I thought, how do I show consistency when I have such an inconsistent schedule?
Yeah, so that's awesome, right? So yeah, that's great. So I use Leo Reichert as a guy that I worked for. He was the president of Ohio Bell when the Bell companies were big, right? And I said to him one time, he worked in the office right next to me, and I said, Leo, give me the 3 things that you do all the time. And he said, number 1, I'm always on time. I'm always in my office at the same time every day. I happen to be an early morning riser. He would show up at 7 o'clock in the morning, and everybody got to know Leo would walk in at 7 o'clock every day. So I've thought about that myself. In this day and age, you can post your calendar. So I think as long as you're showing your team where you're at, the guy on the back dock who doesn't see your car says, oh God, he's in the, Donna's in the ivory tower. She gets to make her own schedule. She comes and goes whenever she wants. Little does that person know that you were at a special event until 9:30 the night before, and you're at a breakfast at the South Shore Leadership Center the next day. But if you post your calendar, nobody has to edit it and all those kinds of things. That gets to that point where they see that, my God, my leader is really out there doing her job. The second thing that he shared with me was, don't ever sandbag an employee. Create a document that you can hand to them and say, this is what it means to work for Harry. And I have that document. But I don't want to use that document at the end of a conversation while Kurt's thinking about walking out the door. I want Kurt to understand this is how I think. You got to be able to share that with somebody. And the third thing that he used to say was always make a meal for your team. It's amazing, he goes, it's amazing how much your team will change when you're in fact the one cooking the chili the night before and you bring in, and next thing you know you got a chili cook-off going on. But you made the meal. You took the time to go out. You broke bread with them. Walls come down, conversations go up, you're genuine. People can say, that's the worst chili I've ever had. And you can say, well, good, try and beat me, and we'll have a chili cook-off in a month. But those are the 3 things that Leo used to say. Be very consistent, or let people know where you're at. Number 2 was, he also told me one time, he said, at the Bell companies, they never answer their phone by their name. They answered it by their extension. And I asked him why that was, and he told me one time, he says, well, that was to screen people. You know, some of you don't want to have that call come in and ruin your day, but that doesn't have anything to do with what we're talking about today. Okay, does that kind of help? Any other closing comments? You're all great leaders. You're here. First thing about a leader is leaders show up. So thanks for coming today. We'd love to have you in L&I, and if there's anything we can do to keep helping you. Our next topic is in December, and it's you'll walk out with at least 8 specific pieces of paper to build your toolbox on building your board and how to go about that and how to analyze your board. So the last topic is all on the board. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.